Let's oh, so this evening we're going to begin our journey with the Heart Sutra, which very much looking forward to. It's been quite some time since it's last been studied as a study text here. And that's one of those things that we should probably be in the routine of circling back to at least every 5 years or so. And I suspect it's been a fair amount longer than that since we last looked at it. So thanks to Shahaku and to Glenn for suggesting Shahaku and all the causes and conditions that bring us to being able to sit here and begin our study of this vital text. So I hope it's a rich several months for all of us as we begin our journey with it. So just and I should say that along with, of course, Shahaku's own commentary in Living by Vow, I'll be using several outside sources, but the one that I'll probably be referencing more often than any of those others would be Red Pine's commentary on the Heart Sutra. In my estimation, this is just an outstanding text. I mean, the Thich Nhat Hanh text, The Heart of Understanding, is great, especially for people newer to the practice. And there are a number of other commentaries, which I'll from time to time introduce and reference in my talks. But Red Pines is just really become the go-to commentary for our time in the English language. So I thought it appropriate that I begin with Red Pine's comment that that he feels that the principal purpose being served by this Heart Sutra was kind of as a countermeasure to what had become a very widely practiced school of Buddhist thought, the Sarvastivada. And I pulled out my Shambhala Dictionary of Buddhism and Zen, which I have occasion to do from time to time, just to give us kind of their brief summary of what this Sarvastivada school of thought consisted of. The Sarvastivadins postulate 75 different dharmas, which, like the ancient notion of atoms, represent final, indivisible units viewed as real. And then from there, they start dividing them into these different categories, which ultimately turn out to constitute these 75 different dharmas, but they distinguish between conditioned and unconditioned. And conditioned dharmas are divided into 4 categories, including form or matter, consciousness, mental factors, which would mean all psychological processes, and dharmas, which are neither form nor consciousness, including things like old age, vitality, attainment, non-attainment, impermanence, and so on. So without going through all 75, but you get the sense that where the Heart Sutra comes into play here as a countermeasure to their teaching, that's kind of, I think Red Pine is pretty accurately describes this as bearing similarities to the ancient Greek uh, theories of the atom, and that reality was divided into these indivisible but very real atomic units. So we have the Sarvastivadans stipulating that things are real. There are these basic units, and they are real. So within that context now, we can see the teachings of the Heart Sutra being presented to take a different stance, saying that there is nothing that is real in the sense of being substantially self-existent, which is, of course, what an atomic theory is all about, at least as it was traditionally understood, going back as far as Greek times and Sarvastivada tradition. So just to put it within its historic context. And one other historic point, I didn't want to spend too much time looking at the history of the Heart Sutra, but I thought it would be helpful to just kind of briefly indicate that while it was originally, it seems, a Sanskrit text, yet it really became more widely known in its Chinese rendition. So our knowledge of it really begins from that earliest time when it became translated into Chinese, which is in the 3rd century. And then it would still be several hundred years before a translation comes out that really served as the launching of the Heart Sutra as one of the most important sutras within the Mahayana tradition. So, and if it's several hundred years after its introduction, now we're putting it into the years when Zen was first taking shape in China, the 500s, 600s, is when the Heart Sutra really began to flourish. And of course, we know that the Diamond Sutra, which is another piece of the Prajnaparamita literature, it was around in that time because of its relationship to the teachings of Huineng, the 6th ancestor. That was kind of his sutra, the Diamond Sutra, which is from the same category of sutras that the Heart Sutra belongs in. So with that, I think, well, first of all, I guess I'll just return to Shahaku and the beginning of his commentary on this. He kind of lays out how the Heart Sutra begins as being this deconstruction, I guess is a good term to use here, deconstruction of everything, including all of the Buddhist teachings. So, and keep in mind the Sarvastivada doctrine and how this would be perceived as being directly contrary to what they were all about. So the Heart Sutra, of course, is saying that the 5 aggregates are empty, which means ourselves are empty through and through, because the 5 aggregates are body and mind, which is us. And our way of experiencing reality with the 18 elements of our consciousness, the 6 sense organs, their objects, and the 6 perceptions that arise from the interaction between the sense and its object. So the eyes, vision, and the objects of our vision, the objects that are seen, and so on for all the other senses. And then ignorance, which is the first of the 12-fold chain of dependent co-arising. Ignorance, and so forth until old age and death, which is the final link in that chain. So a major teaching of the Buddha, the teaching of dependent co-arising, that's empty. The 4 Noble Truths. No suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path. That's the 4 Noble Truths. And nothing to attain. For those who are familiar with the Theravadan teachings, when we talk about attainment, we're referring to the attainments of that tradition, such as based on one's practice in this lifetime, becoming, for instance, a stream enterer. And then there are several stages after that leading up to becoming an arhat, one who does not return. So one escapes the wheel. And of course, even prior to becoming a stream enterer, there's the whole notion of karma and rebirth, and how will one be reborn, into what realm. So the attainment is speaking of next lifetime. So what we attain in this lifetime is really our positioning for the next lifetime. With nothing to attain is saying that's empty. And these are important things to carry with us through our study of the Heart Sutra, because by saying they're empty, we need to recognize that it's not a nihilistic position that's being taken. It's saying that they don't exist in themselves, of themselves, that everything we encounter is actually is literally everything. Everything we encounter is everything. It contains everything because of interdependence. And that's what everything derives its being from. A lovely way of seeing that. And now I'm turning back to Red Pine, as he quotes a 9th century Zen, important Zen teacher, Chia-san, who said that the Tao is everywhere. When you see form, you see the mind. I'm just going to stop there so we can get the full impact of that. When you see form, you see the mind. That's not the way we normally experience things. We see form, a material object, and that's what we see. We don't see anything else. That's our way of filtering things down and encapsulating them. To see form and at the same time to see mind is literally just as we are, we can see ourselves as form and mind, body and mind. That's us in its entirety. So if we see form and then also see mind, we're literally seeing everything every time we see form, whatever we do see. We're seeing its emptiness. We're seeing that it actually contains everything else. So this then becomes, as the beginning of the Heart Sutra puts it, it's practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita. So we're practicing, and the practicing is our living experience and how we take in that experience. How does it manifest? How broadly or narrowly does it manifest? Can we, through our deep practice, begin to facilitate its arising in its true nature to our eyes, to our perception, to our experience, that it arises as its empty nature, which means it's all inclusive. Emptiness is, of course, just boundlessness. So that's the hallmark of everything. So when we're practicing deeply Prajnaparamita, we now begin to see things regularly in such a fashion. So to practice it, as we hopefully will all be doing as we study the Heart Sutra, because the only point of studying it is to be able to practice it. It serves as a guide to us. So that throughout each and every day, as we experience our reality, we begin to fall into the routine of seeing it from that broader scope. To recognize when our vision begins to become more limited. And then, as Dogen would put it, taking the backward step. When we take the backward step, it's kind of the laws of geometry, we begin to see things more broadly. And maybe we need to take a few more backward steps in order to get sufficient broadness in our experience to have the switch get flipped, that we recognize, oh, this is just another example of the emptiness of all things. If we pursue such a practice with diligence, we will begin to cultivate our awareness of the emptiness of all things. We will begin to cultivate our prajna, our wisdom. So it's a very, very insightful statement here, both that the Tao is everywhere, because this is China. So the Tao is their point of reference. And when you see form, you see the mind. But then after that, he says, but people only see form. They don't see the mind. If you can look into the depths and think about what you are doing, one action at a time, you will suddenly see. This is called seeing your nature. So what I've just been laying out is the practice to allow us to see our own nature, that it's empty through and through. And to see that in the most positive way, not our usual way of seeing empty, but rather it's actually expansive to the nth degree, because it's boundless. So there is no exponent. It's just boundless and constantly expanding. And he says, you can't know this nature through knowledge. Can't know it through knowledge. So we have to go beyond knowledge. You can't perceive it through perception. So we have to go through perception, beyond. This nature has no form or appearance. So when you don't see it, that's when you see it. Or those beautiful Zen paradoxes. If you see it, you don't. It's only when you don't see it, because you've transcended that. That's when you see it. So, and the other point, of course, that needs to be made in connection with this deeply practicing the prajnaparamita, it's at that earliest stage of the sutra that Avalokiteshvara appears, because he's the one who's our guide here. It's Avalokiteshvara who's practicing deeply the prajnaparamita. And we've talked about this in the past, that the bodhisattva of wisdom, of prajna, is actually Manjushri. So it would have been logical, if we're thinking just with our logical minds, we should all expect Manjushri to be our tour guide for this one. But no, it's Avalokiteshvara, who of course is the bodhisattva of compassion. And Shariputra, who's kind of the fall guy for this sutra, he's one of the Buddha's principal disciples, and he's considered to be the wisest of all the disciples. So he's kind of like the Manjushri of the disciples. So this is the bodhisattva of compassion who's presenting the wisdom teachings to the wisest disciple of the Buddha's disciples. And this harkens to the fact that compassion is the practice of wisdom. It's wisdom in action. And Shahaku addresses this in his commentary, which is to be expected, because it is a key point of the Heart Sutra, is that wisdom without compassion really doesn't have any reality, so to speak. It's just an idea. So it becomes manifest when it can be out in the world within the realm of interdependence and interacting in that world. So the typical view of the wise one, you know, sitting in an easy chair by a fireplace, maybe pipe in the mouth, and just thinking great lofty thoughts. That's a far cry from the Buddhist notion of wisdom. Wisdom, since it means the thorough understanding of the emptiness of everything, which means that everything is interdependent, interconnected. So the only way that it truly manifests is in such a fashion. It has to be something we can certainly. I'm not downplaying spending some time by a fireplace, smoking a pipe if that's your pleasure, and having some enjoyable times there. But then ultimately, one needs to get off of the chair and go out into the world, and that's where the actualization takes place, the manifestation of it, where it does become part of everything. It begins to send out ripples. So and back to Shahaku, he mentions that the question of why the Heart Sutra negates the teachings of the Buddha is essential to its understanding. Why? Because this would have been how Buddhists would have distinguished themselves from others, by their body of teachings, of doctrines. These are the teachings we follow. So to call them empty seems to be calling all of Buddhism empty. And of course it is. Buddhism is completely empty. And that's, if we put ourselves back in this point in time, that would have been pretty revolutionary move to make. This teaching on emptiness, that what the sacred truths that have been handed down for many centuries now at this point, they're all empty. Now, what isn't spoken to here, but is equally vital, is that the Heart Sutra itself, of course, is also empty. This very teaching. Because obviously we could accept all of this and say, oh, well, at least there is one sacred teaching. I have one that I'm left with, at least. You've given me the Heart Sutra. Okay. But now, the final step is to pull that away. That would have been the complete Heart Sutra if it had included that. But Nagarjuna came along the great philosopher of emptiness. And he made that move, the emptiness of emptiness. So we can't build that into what we replace the Sarvastivada 75 realities with just one, emptiness. That's the reality. No, that's not what's being done here. Nothing, nothing whatsoever exists in such a way. That's a big leap. That's the leap off the 1,000-foot pole, and there's nothing there. Nothing except for everything. So we're kind of leaping into the world. Think of the Prajnaparamita teachings as the mosh pit of religion. You just throw yourself out there. And you're supported by all beings. Literally. You are. And we are constantly. Every experience we have, the whole journey, every step of the way, can only take place because of that. But we have these notions that we've built up over a lifetime that create a whole different picture of reality. I mean, a whole different. So that's why this practice has to be a deep practice. You have to be like, to use the jazz analogy, you have to be like Sonny Rollins when he took his sabbatical and just went up on the Washington Bridge every day in New York and just practiced his tenor saxophone for a couple of years, because he realized in his realm he needed to really deeply practice. And then he come back and re-enter the realm of jazz interdependencies, make a record, start performing again, and so on. But until then, so he did his form of deep practice. And that's really the only way we can hope to be able to consistently see things in their true nature, is to engage the practice fully. And for myself, I don't think that entails having to go off to a monastery. That is going to just present a different set of challenges. It's not that they're free of challenges, or even necessarily that they're fewer challenges. I think it's quite possible to have a normal, common, every man and woman practice in the world and still be able to do this practice at a very deep level. But it does require discipline, and it does require support of Sangha. But it's certainly possible, because the lab where our lab work is done is reality. So we kind of have it easy in that sense. We don't have a commute in order to get into the lab. We're always in the lab. Always. And we always have the equipment with us. It's not like we have to trudge along with us, all these test tubes and beakers and Bunsen burners and whatever they use today, electron microscopes. That'd be a lot to carry around. we've got everything we need. The whole deal. So all we have to do is come as we are. Ordinary mind is the way, as Matsu put it. So just show up with your ordinary mind and start practicing that deep practice in the lab that you happen to find yourself in right now. And when we can do that, the Shahaku talks about the samsara nirvana distinction, which is actually no distinction, because we're not trying to escape one for the other. But it's the fact that it's our transformation of samsara into nirvana through this deep practice. So the lab doesn't change. The lab is just the arena where we conduct our practice. In any arena will do. It's one of the beautiful things about this practice. Dogen says, for instance, with respect to Zazen and Fukan Zazengi, quiet room is suitable. Yeah, it is suitable, but it's not a requirement. Thank goodness, or else we probably never would be able to practice. Pretty hard to come by. But, often we're the worst enemies we're faced with in that respect anyway. Just some simple steps we can take really kind of tone down the volume considerably. And all of a sudden, we find that it's easier to drop into practice. And by practice here, of course, I'm signifying Zazen in the broadest sense of that term. Meeting each thing that arises as it arises. We don't have to be on a cushion facing the wall to do that. We can be right in the middle of our life. So if we can meet each thing, recognizing that thing as the instantiation of all things, just as I am. So it's kind of Buddha meeting Buddha. Hence the appropriateness of the gasho, the bow, to whatever that other being is. Could be a plate of food, could be another person, whatever it is. So that's one practice that can be helpful in practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita. Is just that simple act of gasho. The simple, heartfelt act of gasho. To see the boundlessness of these palms coming together and that entity, that Dharma that I'm bowing to. That we're both boundless, empty through and through. So there is what we could call a sense of the sacred that arises within us, potentially, with each thing we encounter. If we encounter it with that spirit, with that basic understanding. And this is the practice that the Heart Sutra is setting out for us, encouraging us to take on. So it's, Shahaku compares the Heart Sutra to Dogen texts such as Genjo Koan. in the Makahanya Haramitsu, which is Dogen's commentary on the Heart Sutra. But it's also, I think, related very closely to Dogen's Fukan Zazengi. Because Dogen there, I mean, the title means a universal recommendation for the practice of Zazen. So the Heart Sutra is kind of a universal recommendation for the deep practice of Prajnaparamita, which, for any follower of Dogen, they're going to say, yeah, that's Dogen Zazen. That's exactly what he was recommending to everybody. So it's a very short jump, maybe not even a jump, to get from the Heart Sutra to Fukan Zazengi and the practice of Zazen, which is the foundation for Soto Zen and its tradition, our tradition. So this Shahaku talks about this as the sutra about wisdom that sees emptiness. And that called to mind the Suzuki statement from Zen Mind Beginner's Mind about Zazen as wisdom seeking wisdom. That there is this, what brings us to the practice initially is wisdom that we have. But wisdom at that primordial stage that recognizes that there's something missing. And I need to find that. I need to come to grips with that and investigate that deeply. What is it that's missing? Following the norms of society doesn't seem to really be the trick here. And at some stage, for many, many people, they come to that realization that a side path needs to be followed. Get off the main path that everybody else seems to be traveling on, and to take a path that's less traveled and start down that path so that one can begin to find their true meaning. It's not a meaning that we can put in words, which is why it has to be a practice. The practice yields the meaning, but it's not a meaning that you then put out as some universal teaching that can be captured in words. The meaning is not in the words. Dong Shan. So the meaning is in our practice. That's what unearths the meaning. So perhaps we can use words to help people on the path, but the words can't supplant the path. So that once we've got it, now we can just write a book about it, and that's all you need. You don't have to travel the path. Read my book. Memorize it. And you'll now have it. It's not such a thing. It's about finding that path for yourself and traveling that path for yourself that we all have to do. So this teaching, like all teachings, is simply kind of making us all stream enters, path enters. and engaging on the path. But as Dogen would say, once you step in the stream, you become the stream. If you truly step into it, you become the stream, become the practice, become emptiness, become wisdom. That's how this practice gets conveyed and carried forward. So, and that's life. I wouldn't have it any other way myself. So enough from me. I'll bow out. Welcome your thoughts, questions. Brannigan.
Well, thank you. That was really a good beginning on the Heart Sutra. A couple of questions I have. One is I was wondering, I've the Arhats always believe that they were Buddhists or on the path to reach enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And then with bodhisattvas, though, they're not trying to reach enlightenment. We're trying to save everyone. Or I'm not saying it properly, but is the heart, my question is the Heart Sutra the point at which Mahayana Buddhism begins?
It's one of the points. I wouldn't say, that it's the point, because that's turning it into something, I guess. But it's certainly, and we also have to keep in mind that the Heart Sutra was not the first written of the Prajnaparamita sutras.
Okay.
Which there are many, many, many. I mean, from what I have read and understand, there's a version which I have, because Edward Kanza did do a translation of it quite a few years ago. It's the Prajnaparamita Sutra in 8,000 lines. That's seen as being at least one of the earliest, if not the earliest. The Heart Sutra came considerably later. So the question is more about, and even the teachings on emptiness. I mean, that's not in and of itself a radical break from the Buddha's own teachings. And what was presented in some of the sutras from the Theravadan canon of sutras, the teachings of the Buddha. So the teachings on no self are fundamental to Buddhism. It's just that they were kind of taken in a somewhat different direction. Once they were freed from some of the conceptual apparatus that was created by the Theravadins, such as these stages, among which were stream enterer or arhat, or once returner would have been another one.
My other question is more about psychology and emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching, actually it's an older series, but I finally started watching The Bear, about this chaotic kitchen in Chicago. And it's wonderfully done. But it's so much of it is about woundedness of an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think about dealing with woundedness in terms of the Heart Sutra.
Yeah. And I think in order to practice the teachings of the Heart Sutra, we have to, it's rooted, I think, in the practice of letting go,
Okay.
as is Dogen Zazen, of course. Opening the hand of thought is to let go. Open up your clenched fist and let go. So the suffering is often the clenched fist.
Okay. Thank you. That helps so much.
Okay, good. Well,
Joe has a question.
oh, Joe, I'm sorry.
Yes, just a curiosity question. Earlier in your talk, you mentioned that the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra were of the same category. I'm just wondering what you mean by category, and maybe what other sutras are contained in that one, and what are the other categories?
Yeah, I mean, the category is the Prajnaparamita literature. So most of the other sutras are simply termed Prajnaparamita Sutra. And then they are distinguished by stating how many lines they contain. So it's by length is how they're kind of separated. To my awareness, the only two that have what we could call standard type titles are the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra. Everything else that I've encountered, I have two other sutras from this collection outside of the Diamond and the Heart. They're both just Prajnaparamita sutras. And they're all, therefore, teachings on the emptiness of all things. So they keep coming back again and again and again. That's what they have in common, and that's why they're referred to as Prajnaparamita Sutras. Now, one thing we didn't get into, and I was kind of thinking of doing it next week, but we can at least touch on it here, is the meaning of Prajnaparamita, because that's really, I think, the heart of your question is, what do these things all have in common if they're all about Prajnaparamita? And we can at least take the first step or two down that path right now, and then I suspect it's going to get elaborated on a bit further next week. But the whole notion of paramita, and this is coming from Shahaku, he actually has a couple of points to make about it. It means to cross the river to the other shore. So we're going from the world of samsara to the realm of nirvana. And of course, part of realization is to recognize, kind of like in the Wizard of Oz, that you're already there. But we have this sense that it's crossing the shore to practice the paramita. So it's going, that's why in another sense, it's referred to as going beyond, wisdom beyond wisdom. And that applies to all of the paramitas. Maybe an easy one to see that with is generosity. Generosity beyond generosity. Because we have our conventional view of generosity, which is just being generous, very giving. But there's that sense, because it's not imbued with prajna, It's not being done from the sense of just a natural flow because of our union, our ultimate interdependence, harmony, intimate harmony. Rather, it's seen as giver and receiver. Not the emptiness of the three wheels, giver, receiver, and gift, but the very substantial existence of giver, me, and receiver, and what's being given. So we have that uppermost in our minds. So that's generosity. Generosity beyond generosity is simply giving. You know, we talk about shikantaza, just sitting, nothing to attain, just giving. We just give. It's like just sitting down on our cushion and seeing what comes up. We're kind of seeing what arises, what needs exist, and like Avalokiteshvara, extending one of our 1,000 arms to address, to help. And that's all. Now, there's no sense of separation at all. So we are practicing the emptiness of giver, receiver, and gift. It's all interdependent, all interlinked. And the positions could be and are interchangeable. I'm the giver in this particular transaction, perhaps, or at least could be seen that way, but yet what am I? I'm just passing through. I'm able to serve as a seeming giver here because of others that have given to me so lavishly. And that means I can now give. So who's actually the giver? Is it me? Well, that's open to some serious question. I think it's good to question that. Yeah. That's going beyond. That's paramita. So wisdom beyond wisdom. That's why we honor, the patriarchs, the Buddhas, and the ancestors, rather than just getting all puffed up ourselves. We're grateful that we had all the guidance we had and all the rich experience I've had. And I can't recall any of that experience that was just about me. It was always other people were involved, other things, other beings. And they're all very enriching. Whatever wisdom I might have, I'm not saying I have any, but whatever I might have is certainly because of all of these past things. So it's empty. It's going beyond wisdom. That I can open my hand of wisdom, of generosity, of virtuous practice, of patience. Open the hand.
So with our Hoyan studies on the interconnectedness of all things, would that be part of this, or would that be its own category as far as other sutras that are similar to that?
Yeah, I think I'd rate it maybe a sibling. It's much closer than the first cousin. It's really close. Yeah, because it really is just another explication, elaboration on the teachings of the Prajnaparamita, looking at interdependence, just in a little more depth, from a different perspective. But it's strongly rooted. Without Prajnaparamita literature, I don't think we'd have Huayan. It kind of is built directly upon that foundation, I think.
I think it's like the interconnectedness, looking at things from the interconnectedness of all things is like just a different perspective of emptiness. It's another way to see everything at once, sort of.
Yes, Yeah, I think that's right. That's certainly how that's how I've experienced it and how I've found inspiration from it.
Mhm. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, well, if anybody has or maybe has even memorized the Eco-Sattva vows, you could lead us in chanting out. Otherwise, we could always revert to the other chant, our bodhisattva, our standard bodhisattva vows. Seems like maybe Mike's pulling it up.
I've got it, but I don't know, black. It's not like- so I could lead us if you want.
Well, we can't join you, or it'll just be a cacophony. So
Yeah, I was gonna say.
just run us through.
I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors, the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world, and to ask for help when I need it, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows.
Thank you. On on that note, bow out. I'm so glad you were able to join us. I'm also glad I I moved the meeting because, yeah, I mean, the number just kept going up. Last time I looked, it was like over 450. So it's like, man, we don't need to be out there polluting by driving a vehicle out in this thing. It's just awful. Good God. So this has been good. And I'm trusting that Saturday morning we'll be able to get back to the Zen now. We'll at least get back to under 150, maybe. All right. Well, good night, everybody.